Never saw it coming, never anticipated it. It just happened.
It will do 90% of the work.
If you don't teach the AI to understand what you are looking at, it's going to crash and burn.
That's not just transactional. It's more than that.
Insurance language, it is an art.
Show your value, show your worth.
There's 160 schemes across all lines of business. Anybody that tells you different, I don't think is being very truthful.
Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a company that works with professional services firms from around the world to help them increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is John Standish. John is the co-founder and chief innovation officer for Charlee.ai, a technology company providing artificial intelligence and predictive analytics solutions for the insurance industry. Their solutions help insurance companies reduce claims litigation and severity while managing reserves efficiently. John's journey starts as a law enforcement officer and takes us all the way to becoming a technology entrepreneur. John, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Now, I'm looking forward to the conversation, especially knowing a little bit about your journey to where you are today. But for the viewers and listeners who just might not know who you are or what you've done, can you give them a brief introduction into yourself and how you got to where you are today?
So I am one of the co-founders and the chief innovation and compliance officer for Charlee.ai. Thank you for the introduction. I mean, you captured it perfectly. So how I ended up here in, being part of the Charlee.ai team starts way back. Way back, my first career was law enforcement in California. I did 32 years. Started with the California Highway Patrol. I was there for 14 years, 9 of which in the investigations unit. And I first started out working on a team called the Multidisciplinary Accident Investigation Team, or MATE, where we would reconstruct catastrophic incidents, multiple car collisions, multiple fatalities, things like that. And we would scientifically figure out what was the sequence of events leading up to a collision or an impact, what happens during the impact, and then what happens after the impact, and looking at all different 3 phases of environments of a traffic collision: the environment, the roadway, and the people in the vehicles. So I did that for a while, and then I was tasked to go into the insurance fraud unit to specifically investigate staged automobile collisions. The logic is that you can prove how a collision occurred by using math and physics and documenting the evidence in the cars. You can also prove how a collision could not have occurred as reported, which hence this is where the insurance fraud aspect comes alive. People using staged automobile collisions to steal money from insurance companies. So I did that for 9 years with the Highway Patrol. And then I was recruited by the California Department of Insurance, the enforcement branch, to transfer in as a detective to investigate more sophisticated insurance fraud crimes, a lot of organized crime rings, things like that. And I did that for 17 years, and I retired as the chief of the fraud division there. So after I retired, I started a consulting business where I was doing expert testimony in trial, defense of insurance carriers if they investigated the claim properly, if they abided by the anti-fraud regulations in place that carriers must abide by in spotting and reporting fraud, and also as an expert in insurance fraud schemes and how the schemes work. So I did that. I started that, and then I went to work for SAS, the software company, SAS, as a consultant in the financial crimes practice and criminal justice safety practice. I did that for 3 years, and then I received a phone call out of nowhere from a wonderful person by the name of Sri Ramaswamy, our CEO, who recruited me to come and be part of a startup there in Silicon Valley. And never saw it coming, never anticipated it. It just happened. So I started with Sri, and we built Charlee.ai up to where it is now.
Wow.
Way back. And so that's how I got here.
Yeah, I thought that it's so interesting to hear the journey that has taken you from where you started to where you are now in an AI technology firm as a co-founder, and obviously your background in the insurance fraud, white collar crimes sector of law enforcement, without a doubt, had a phenomenal effect on the trajectory you ended up arriving at. Tell us how your background in investigating these types of insurance frauds and white collar crimes inform your approach to building AI solutions for the insurance industry.
Sure. So, when I was asked to start investigating stage automobile collisions, I did not know anything about insurance. The only thing I knew is every month I had to write a check to pay for my premium,
Yeah.
right? The only thing I knew. So it was a lot of OJT, on the job training. People from the insurance industry, the SIU investigators would come into our office and bring boxes and boxes of documents saying, I have a fraud. And it's like, okay, all right, let's go through this. And what I had to do is like, okay, I was very well comfortable in enforcing crimes in the investigation of crimes. One of the first things I had to do is figure out, how does an insurance company operate? What is the claims workflow? What is the claims process? What do people do, when they file a claim and whatever? Because you need to figure out where are the loopholes that people are walking into that gives them an opportunity to steal money.
Mm.
So once I got that down, then it just started flowing.
Yeah.
And then that's how I got here.
Yeah.
Like, what I do on the team is, well, like, first of all, it's full disclosure here. I do not have a computer science degree.
Mm.
I don't do. What I do is provide deep domain experience in working with the engineers, the architects, the data scientists. I mean, Charlee says that I'm an NLP scientist because helping with the models and the ontologies of making the AI understand insurance lingo and speak in the process. So that's what I contribute to the team. And, our team, we started on a multidisciplinary approach. And this is what I took back from learning to reconstruct automobile collisions. I mean, one person can't do it alone. You have an expert in the vehicle, you have an expert in occupant kinematics, you have an expert in highway design, and you have a motor carrier specialist, a mechanic a mechanic expert, all working together in concert, reconstructing an event. So what we did at Charlee is we took that same methodology and we brought in the data scientists, the architects, the system engineers, the deep domain expertise, the natural language processing component of it, and we built our AI for insurance carriers, always thinking about the guardrails or the regulations that the business of insurance must abide by. Because insurance is a very heavily regulated industry. So, carriers must abide by laws and regulations in selling premiums, receiving claims, processing the claims, settling the claims on time, things like that. And so thinking about all that, designing an AI that would be compliant and stand up to exams and inquiries from regulators to a carrier, and that the AI is honest, it's efficient, it's accurate, things like that. So that's how I am here today.
It's great to hear. In terms of then Charlee.ai as a software, as a technology platform, tell me more about the journey of building that out, because that is obviously and you've touched on it there. You're not necessarily in the weeds, right? You're not the engineer, you're not that, but it requires someone that understands domain, understands the sector, has experience in that. How do you work within a team of engineers? How is it that you're able to build the platform with your knowledge base?
So imagine an insurance claim file, a stack of paper, like this, and you just feed that into a large language model. If you don't teach the large language model to understand what you are looking at, I mean, the AI is going to crash and burn. It's just not going to work. So what we have to do, what we started training our large language model, way back in 2016. Started building our LLM, and we trained it on over 55 million claims on all lines of business. And we started developing insights or patterns that we see in claim files. And so what has to be done is, the data scientist doesn't recognize an abbreviation like FNOL, first notice of loss, doesn't recognize an ROR, a reservation of rights, that the carrier submits to fully investigate the claim. So working in helping them understand and educate the claims workflow process, the regulations that are in place guiding the insurance carrier's behavior, and then what's expected of a claimant or the insured, sometimes called the first party. So our domain people, we are joined at the hip with the engineers and the data scientists and the architects making this system work, understanding.
I can imagine.
Insurance language it is an art. It is its own lexicon. I have and it is so vast. I mean, I have right here with me the Bible, the Law of Insurance and Risk Management terms. I've been doing this for a while, and I still have to go to this.
Yeah, of course.
I've never seen that one before. Make sure that we're on track. And this is one of the things too, in the world of natural language processing, people, the claims examiners, right? So we are now dealing with the kids that grew up on 140 characters or less in communicating, still alive, what they're doing now. And now you have to constantly stay on top of and teach the AI, like, what does this stuff mean?
Yeah.
Because like AI is like a kindergartner, right?
Yeah.
It's a 5-year-old. It absorbs everything.
Yeah.
You got to teach it what's right and what's wrong.
Sure. That's actually a really interesting and really great point. It's you can ask it anything and it can give you anything, right? And to be able to train an AI, a large language model, to be able to understand the specificity of something is the skill, right? And it actually strikes me a little bit. You mentioned that you started way back in 2016. For me, that feels early. I don't know how early that was for you guys, but in terms of ChatGPT's only been out for a few years, and before that, the vast majority of people would have had an idea of what AI was, but they would probably think Terminator Judgment Day was AI, really, and never really
Yeah. What you're describing is the Hollywood effect.
Exactly. Right.
So, we saw this, back in public safety criminal investigations, we saw this in jury trials where, the TV show CSI, when it came out, years ago, very, very, very popular. And then there's so many spin-off shows from it now or whatever. It's still popular. We were seeing when, jurors were being, brought into the courtroom or whatever, there was this vibe like, where are the holograms? Where are the lasers? Because that's what they understand, because that's what they're exposed to. The same thing is going on with AI. What does the layperson or the consumer know about AI?
Yeah.
What you see in Hollywood.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And it's great entertainment. It's good shows. I don't really care for shows where there's no fact checking, where they have a scientific advisor involved. Entertainment, as long as you realize that. So that's what, I'm on a crusade to help insurance executives understand this and how it's applicable in their business process and how to use it correctly and abide by regulations, stay out of trouble, and be profitable.
So let me just understand. Let's say an insurance company or an executive goes, okay, I want to go ahead and I want to use Charlee.ai. What would Charlee.ai do for them in order for them to get the most out of it?
We do 4 main things, right? The first thing is that the artificial intelligence engine will predict the severity of a claim starting at first notice of loss. In other words, how much is this claim going to potentially cost me? Right? So that's the first setting. Second thing it will do is it will predict pretty accurately too. We're right there at 90%.
Wow.
But if a person is going to retain an attorney, and we do that by measuring the sentiment on how people are communicating, the words and phrases, the tone, things like that. The other thing it does is it will predict if the claim is going to fall into litigation. So that gives the carrier, the claims team, a chance, like if the AI alerts like this has an 87% chance that this claim is going to be litigated, that's a warning that, wait a minute, we need to gain control of this and mitigate this because we don't want it to go into litigation. So this is going to cost us more money. The other thing that Charlie will do is identify suspected insurance fraud schemes. There's 160 schemes across all lines of business. So we have programmed and trained Charlie to recognize the patterns, what people do. This kind of like goes back to the criminal investigation side of a term people hear, what's the perp's MO? What is the perpetrator's method of operation? Because people do certain things in committing crimes. So all of that is included, in that. And so we identify the fraud schemes, we provide alerts, and so that the claims examiner can handle it properly at that point. The other thing we do is help accurately predict how much the claim should be reserved. So in other words, by law, when a claim is received, an insurance carrier has to take money and put it aside for that claim, in case the carrier goes insolvent. But there's money there to handle that claim.
Sure.
So it's kind of an art where you don't want to under reserve and you don't want to over reserve. If you over reserve, you're taking cash that could be used elsewhere.
Sure.
Right. That, and CEOs are very, very, very cognizant about this. And so what Charlie will do is help the claims examiner accurately reserve the claim, starting at FNOL. And then in the life cycle of the claim as it goes on, will adjust depending on the more information that comes in. So those are the four things we do.
That's really interesting to understand, because to me it makes me think of one thing is helping insurance companies and keep a lot more of an efficient way of running their organization, right? And then being able to handle the claims in the most efficient way. In terms of then your role as a chief innovation officer, how do you foster a culture of innovation while maintaining the compliance requirements of the insurance industry? And as you mentioned, it's critical in the industry, right?
So it's kind of like it's a balance, right?
Sure.
It's like, being aware of the current advancements of AI technology. Okay, I hear or see something and it's like, okay, how could this be applied into the world of insurance and claim specific and be compliant? There's some stuff that, no, it's not legal. You can't do that. But others, so you take a concept and then working with our chief technical officer and the science team, take Charlie in that direction and develop, a tool that can be used in helping do this. It's kind of like in technology in this space. Sri and I started going to, there was an organization called the Silicon Valley Insurance Accelerator, SVIA. And this was back in 2016, where they invited startups, insurance industry executives, and venture capitalists, to come together and listen to the ideas that these startups would have that they wanted to present to the insurance industry. And I will always remember the very first one I went to. There was like over 500 people in this room, and I was there, and all day long, companies would give up and do a 5-minute pitch. Mm-hmm. Whatever, and the people, they'd rate you, and hopefully you made a connection and got funded, things like that. But our turn wasn't until late in the afternoon, so I sat there all day. And what really struck me is like the creativity and the brilliance of people coming up with this stuff. I was just blown away. Like, I'd never think of that. That's amazing. Yeah. But it was highly illegal. It would never pass an exam or an audit world of insurance. I mean, right? So that was like the first thing is like, okay, people that are creating things, they don't really know about the business of insurance. They may know a little thing and they don't understand. So a lot of those companies aren't around.
Yeah. Wow.
They came and faded away. And so when you're looking at innovation in the new advancements, it's like, okay, you have to check the box. Is it ethical? Is it factual? Is it free of bias? Or, you have to constantly look at it to make sure that the system doesn't become biased. Because I'll tell you, the regulators, their number one charge right now, the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Companies, who, I mean, we are there, we are in that community with them, is highly, highly guarded against AI being used in processing of a claim, no human involved, and the AI becomes biased and is discriminating against protected classes of people. So, Hispanic people filing claims are being denied. I mean, this is a hypothetical. Sure. Or you live in a certain area, in a demographic area, and they charge you more rates because of the area where you live. I mean, those are like raw, broad examples. And so you've got to stay on top of this to make sure that your AI is not biased.
Sure.
And won't pass these things. So I'm sitting in the sphere of the creativity, what people are doing in the AI, and then bringing that and translating and helping our team advance.
Sure.
To make sure that we're compliant.
I think that's really interesting what you said there, and it sounds to me as though you were the competitive advantage that many of these other startups didn't have by just having an understanding of how the insurance industry worked, the regulations and things like that. In terms of then the trends you're seeing in the industry, what are the biggest trends you're currently seeing? How are things developing, and where does things go?
So AI people are finally waking up. And they're seeing this because one of the things the industry is suffering right now is a skills gap. Let me explain this. It wasn't all that long ago people would enter the business of insurance and say, this is my career. I'm going to do my career. This is what I'm going to do. And when people got hired, I learned that before you even sat down at a desk to adjust claims, companies had their own like in-house training. It's like 8 weeks before they turn. They're not doing that anymore. They're hiring people and putting them at the desk and training them as they're going along. And so what's happened is that your senior, most accomplished owners and employees, they're walking out the door. They're retiring. And the industry has not done a good job, and the industry's not alone. Government is the worst at this. Prepping the incoming workforce, transferring that knowledge.
Sure.
So one of the things AI can do is quickly train the new person and bring insights that maybe eventually they'll learn, but how long? 2 or 3 years down the road? And meanwhile, you lose control of a claim, fraud is perpetrated, you get a nuclear verdict in there. So the executives are saying, wait a minute, AI can start plugging some of these gaps and improve the efficiency of the claims workflow.
Yeah. Amazing. That's really interesting to hear. And I think I've heard that before with regards to a skills gap and a skills shortage coming in more and more, and the transfer of knowledge not being effectively transferred over. And I think it's really interesting to understand, because even a few years ago, people would always say, go into coding, right? Coding is the way to go. You upskill and learn how to code. And now you're seeing tools with AI that are taking away the raw difficulty of coding. They will do 90% of the work, and then a experienced coder can come in and go, okay, well, this is the code. I can now amend it to what I need it to do and things like that. But people are getting to that level, and because of AI, people don't necessarily have the raw understanding beforehand. And so now you're seeing less people at this level able to decipher what AI is doing. So I think it's a really interesting point you mentioned there. This section of the podcast we like to call the Entrepreneur's Room, right? And it's a series of questions we like to ask all of our guests. And it's really to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand how business leaders think and operate within a business. So the first question I like to ask in this segment of the podcast is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader of the business?
Wow. Okay. Well, first off, I'm an early riser.
Sure.
I just wake up at 5 a.m. Within a day, right? I am scanning and reading, the industry journals, both insurance and technology, what's going on, what are the current events. I learned this when I went to command college. There's a process that like Rand Corporation uses and other things called STEEP. When you look at a newspaper article, you think of STEEP, STEEP, society, technology, environment, political. How does this thing they're talking about fit into those categories? And moving forward into the future, what can you start thinking or doing? So it's kind of like, future studies. You're looking out over the horizon. Every day I'm doing that, looking at that. And then we have our customers. We have our customers that are fully deployed, making sure everything is running fine, solving any problems, if there are any. Then we have our sales pipeline. Our prospects, people starting proof of concepts, helping them through that process, helping them get their data in order that they send us for a pilot, a proof of concept, working with our business analysts and reviewing the data and making sure that everything is functioning and properly and the AI is giving the proper insights. And then also working with the co-founders. We all have our own roles and responsibilities to keep this machine moving forward.
Sure.
Every day. It's like people I guess it's like if you are actually in an entrepreneur's chair, I don't think anyone has any idea what's involved, how much time commitment there is, making this work. And then to be honest with you, selling into the insurance industry is not easy.
Yeah.
It's complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people involved, and they don't exactly pivot on a dime.
Yeah.
Right? It's very methodical, it's slow. So I tell people, you got to hang in there. I mean, it's not unusual for a sales cycle to be 6 months to a year, if not longer. I mean, I mean, that's because, I mean, it's like one of the things I've observed is like a carrier approaches us. They're interested. We meet, we speak, we talk, brainstorm with them. They got ideas, but they're still processing claims. They still got, I mean, a workload to do, right? And then they come back, and then we start all over again, and eventually get to the point. So
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of red tape, as you mentioned previously. There's regulations and there's a lot of red tape in insurance in general. There's different layers of management. There's different layers to go through before a decision is even made. So I can imagine the sales cycle being longer than what you would otherwise see in maybe other areas in other sectors. But I also can see that once someone has onboarded, I can imagine they stick around for a decent amount of time.
yes.
Yeah. And so that hard work pays off once they're in the ecosystem, right?
Yeah. But then, but then it's I mean, we have to nurture
Yes.
the engagement and the compliance. I mean, we're constantly reviewing our models and the accuracy, and if we have to make any tweaks to it, any changes to make sure that it's functioning properly, there's no bias in there, things like that. So it's like, I mean, we do model refreshes very regularly.
Oh wow!
To do this, so it's not like here's your sack of widgets, drop it on the desk. I'll see you next. No, it's not like that at all. Not in the world of AI.
And tech in general, there's constant innovation that's involved. There's constant iterations, there's constant improvements and growth and things like that. It does sound like what you would expect. In terms of then, as a leader of the business, and obviously I'm sure you have your responsibilities and roles within, as you mentioned there, every co-founder has their own responsibilities and roles. What metrics are the most important for you within your role in the business?
So looking at, I'm very, very cognizant of the return on investment a customer gets from us. For what we are charging, are they getting that benefit and more? So, helping fill in the gap on the skills gap. What would it take to replace a position at a senior level with loads of experience, if you can even recruit somebody to do that, versus, okay, you have an AI that has an extensive ontology that can help train your new people for a fraction of the cost of that person, right? I mean, so that I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the time involved in getting a project off the ground and balancing that, because I mean, we're a business. We're here to make money. We're not a 501(c) nonprofit. That's not how this works. So always balancing that. And another thing I'm looking at is constantly our innovation team staying current. What's going on in the industry right now? So let me give you an example. Here in the Western United States, the catastrophic firestorms, mudslides, eastern United States, hurricanes, things like that, watching this type of activity, and then trying to stay ahead of it. Like, wait a minute, our customer is going to get an influx of these hurricane total loss claims. Here we go, making sure everything is tuned and running and helping them, stay on top of that.
That's actually a really interesting point there. You have to keep your ear to the ground almost on current events and what's going on outside of just the insurance world, right? Because if there's a natural disaster, if there's something going on, understanding that that's when your customers are going to be at their busiest. They'll be working the most. And so you being able to tend to them when they're at their most difficult is quite a key aspect. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, we always tell people we're your partner.
Yeah.
Right? We're here to help you. I mean, we're not here to hinder you or block you. So it's having that relationship and that open communication, listening to, like, if something's not working or someone doesn't understand, being able to pick up on that and help them understand, or we have to fix something.
Yeah.
It's something that we didn't do right that we thought that we did right.
Yeah. And that's the skill. That's the skill, is understanding that you have a relationship with your customer that's not just transactional, right? It's more than that. And if you have that kind of attitude of providing value at every stage of the relationship and at every stage of the partnership or engagement, then you have the best possible chance of having a successful partnership and engagement with the customer or the client, right? So
it's like I'll go back to when I was a chief in the executive chair at a law enforcement agency, and you have your relationships within your community.
Yeah.
And those relationships are so critical and important. maintaining that communication, being visible, being available to assist, being able to help problem solve, keeping your constituent, happy and functioning, right? You don't want to be a hindrance of that. And it's a constant thing. You just can't do it once a year at a conference. It's constant. It's constant, 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 constant. And to me, that's very important. I mean, the relationships are everything
Yeah. And
in this world.
that's 100% something that's hugely important to me, and the way we work with our partners as well. Constantly being visible, constantly being available whenever there is an issue, or having clear lines of communication, clear touch points and things like that. And I think that there's a lesson in that, especially because it permeates through every area of life, not just business, right? And being very good with communication. In terms of then Charlie in general, how are you currently growing the business? What kind of sales and marketing and business development activities are you currently doing to grow the business? You touched on sales pipeline and things like that. So what are you doing?
So I mean, we have a dedicated sales team, and they're very, very busy.
Yeah.
So I mean, we are at first of all, we are at all the major conferences for the insurance claim space. We go to the biggest ones to get obviously the most exposure and a good return on investment for our cost to get in there. The other thing we do is social media, a lot of social media. We do 3 LinkedIn posts a week, little snippets, about, trends and how AI applies in this world. More of a thought leadership. It's not a sales LinkedIn thing, because, I mean, people get burned out on those. I don't want to see this anymore. More of a thought leadership, because it's like, it's to me, it's like, I remember in law school, they used Socratic teaching method where the professor would ask a question to make you think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You'd reply, and then he'd ask you a question like, well, wait a minute. Are you sure? I mean, let's think this thing out. So we do a lot of social media posts, white papers, and blog as well, and getting those pushed out. And I always want these things prepared. And it's like, I mean, we've all seen these white papers, and it's like, it's like being in academia, and it's like, oh my, this is gonna be hard. So writing it in such a manner that captures your interest in the first 2 sentences, like, this is a real problem I'm dealing with. Oh, this is interesting. I'll sit there and read that. So making sure that we're doing that, and doing that. And we have a very robust pipeline. I mean, we are growing.
It's always great to hear, and it's always interesting to hear the type of strategies that are being used by organizations at the moment, companies at the moment, to be able to do it. And fundamentally, there's a lot of overlap. Everyone's doing the same kind of thing. And conferences are massive as well. So it's really interesting to hear.
The other thing is going to a conference and being invited to speak as a thought leader.
Yeah.
Really are big into that. I mean, we don't go to conferences to make sales pitches. We want to get engaged in thought leadership discussions. And we want people to look to us as, wait a minute, okay, these guys know what they're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, let's bring them in and help shed some light on the issue.
In terms of then, you've had an illustrious career from, as you mentioned, 32 years, starting off from law enforcement, and now you're a chief innovation officer at a tech firm. What have you tried before? What didn't work? What are the lessons? What are your biggest lessons throughout your whole career? What can you share with the viewers and listeners that they can go away with?
Okay, all right. Well, I'll tell you, one, don't boil the ocean when you start.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when we came together, I mean, we have made 2 major pivots. I mean, when we first started this company, it was going to be broken down into 2 units. There was going to be a healthcare unit focusing on pharmacy. And then, I was going to set up a fraud program, developing software for fraud. Okay, well, first off, there's a lot of companies already in that space. It's going to be very difficult to open that door and gain traction. So we made the pivot away from that and started, moving into the world of AI. So the first lesson is focus on something that is small, that can get implemented and into the claims workflow system and grow from there.
Sure.
So like when you look at our platform, Charlie is very vast. It does a lot of things. So when we talk with a potential customer, they may only have 1 or 2 problems that they want to solve. They don't need the whole platform. Only need 1 or 2 things, and to be able to realize that and then help the customer be more successful with that one tool.
Sure.
So I mean, it's nice that to have a suite or a library of different AI functions. That's really cool, but I have yet to meet anybody that wants the entire library. It's only I need help with this, I need help with that, and then they move and become successful. And that's how I think you grow.
Without that.
You start out small, be successful, and then start expanding.
Love it. Love it. That's a great lesson, I think. It definitely is something that I learned in my time running this organization. You start off with a small project, you show your value, show your worth, and you kind of move on to a bigger project with the same client or the same, and then you go again, and then you go again, and you develop, and that's how you grow, without a doubt. And I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. Absolutely. The last question I'd like to end all of our podcasts with is if you had a magic wand that you can wave to solve one business problem, what would that be?
Wow, God, it's picking the problems.
Yeah.
My magic wand that I would wave over the enterprise is to be able to make sure that there's no issue with funding for the R&D, for the growth process, in securing customers. I mean, some days it's a struggle. Some days it's a celebration. This is the ups and downs.
Yeah.
And anybody that tells you different, I don't think is being very truthful.
Yeah.
They are an entrepreneur, have a company, and they're starting this. There are days that you struggle, and then there are days we celebrate. So if I could just make the wave, if I had a wand that could do that, where I could go out and, we are never lacking for resources or innovative or being able to bring people in. That's my wand. But we are surviving and we are prospering.
Yeah.
But that's my wand.
I love
That's
it.
what
I love it, John. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, and I thought you've shared some really interesting insights that I'm sure that our viewers and listeners will thoroughly have enjoyed. For all those who are maybe want to find out more about you, where can they find you? Where should they go?
We are very easy to find. Charlee.ai on the web, www.charlee.ai, CHARLEE.ai. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. Standish on LinkedIn. Charlee, I'm there.
We'll put all the links in the description of the podcast anyways, if anyone wants to find you. But again, John, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing your time today.
Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.